So fellas, we're fresh off UFC Noche, and these are the fights to make after UFC Noche. Every prelim winner, every main card fighter, you know the drill, and we'll go in there with the first prelim winner, the Ultimate Fight finale. Daniel Donchenko gets the job done against Rodrigo Cezinado, winning a contract. Dana White doesn't hand him the Ultimate Fighter trophy like he normally does. He was too busy in boxing, but still comes through, gets the win. I think it's going to be a ton of fun in the welterweight division. So for Daniel Donchenko, I'd put him in there with Danny Barlow. This might be a big step up for your UFC debut, but he looked really good on the Ultimate Fighter throughout the entire tournament. Just absolutely destroyed Cezinado, and I think he's one of the funner fighters we've had come from the Ultimate Fighter. Fun striker, dangerous guy, always in your face. And I put him against Danny Barlow, who was once like an undefeated welterweight prospect, but I don't know if I rate him that highly. He just got knocked out by Sam Patterson, and I'm not going to say like Sam Patterson's a bad striker because he just KO'd his other opponent, Trey Waters, but he's not like an elite striker. And I think Danny Barlow was slightly overrated. I think this is a really good fight to test Daniel Donchenko. Two guys with a high finishing rate. If Daniel Donchenko can finish Barlow, a great UFC debut. If Barlow can get the job done against Donchenko, I still expect it to be a fun fight. So I think a fun fight between two fairly dangerous strikers, a bit of a step up for Donchenko. Him and Danny Barlow get the booked. Barlow's just been knocked out. He's probably going to be back early 2026, so I'd get that fight done. Donchenko, Barlow. And then for Montserrat Rendon, fraud checks. Now, she didn't fraud check, but she shuts down Alice Pereira as an underdog. I guess she looked pretty good in the fight because Alice Pereira was on the back foot, kind of doing nothing the entire fight. So for Montserrat Rendon, I'd put her in there with Melissa Mullins. I think this is a fair step up in competition. Both of these women have lost a couple of times in the UFC. They've both lost to Zlenta Yakova in the most recent losses. Melissa Mullins has won twice. Montserrat Rendon's won twice. I think it makes sense. It's kind of in the women's bantamweight division is so shallow that it genuinely takes like 2 wins, regardless of if you've lost, to get in the top 15. So I think for Rendon, considering that she has just beat, she's just beat Alice Pereira, she's back in the winning column. I think if she can beat Melissa Mullins as well, she deserves a bit of a step up. Both of these women are kind of low-level bantamweights. They can strike, they can grapple, they've been in there a few times, they're both a bit gritty. I actually think it would be a fun fight because they are both kind of walk-forward strikers, but I'm not expecting anything high level. It's just a step up for Rendon, away from Alice Pereira, so I'd get that done. And then for Alden Correa, debuts in the UFC, looks good doing it as he goes out there and beats Alessandro Costa. For Alden Correa, I'd put him in there with Ramazan Temirov. Yeah, that's it. We're going straight in the top 15 for his UFC debut. He obviously just went out there and looked good against Alessandro Costa, finished Alessandro Costa, and that's a sick debut. He looked really sharp with the hands, and again, Costa's not an easy guy to put out, so I'm going to actually give him someone in the top 15, and I'm going to give him Ramazan Temirov, and the reason I think Ramazan Temirov should fight down is because he just popped for steroids. He's going to be out for quite some time. He beat Charles Johnson early this year, but in my opinion, if you fight for steroids, you deserve to fight outside the rankings. So Temirov, let him welcome in Correa in the top 15. I don't think this is too big of a step up for Correa, because like I said, he looks at home in the UFC. He looked good against Costa. I think he's top 15 ready, and I don't even think this is too hard of a matchup. The way that he was piecing up Alessandro Costa, Temirov's dangerous in the first round, but he gasses out quick, and he's not by no means an elite striker. So I'd do this, get Alden Correa in the top 15. We kind of need these new names in the top 15 at flyweight, because at the top it's been the same guys over and over again. We've got Joshua Van now, but we need some new guys, and Alden Correa looked good. Let's give him Temirov, who deserves to fight down because he took steroids. I think that makes sense. Correa, Temirov, step up in competition. And then for Jesus Aguilar, another flyweight undefeated fighter, I think a stylistic fight that I think makes sense is Jesus Aguilar versus Cody Durden. I kind of like this fight. I think it makes sense. Aguilar's won a couple of times in the UFC, 4-1, lost to Estevam in his last, but just beat Garuli. Cody Durden's been doing the opposite, losing most of his recent fights, but to be fair, he has been facing these dangerous up-and-comers, so I think this is a fair step up for Aguilar. He beat Luis Garuli, and they've both got grappling heavy bases. Aguilar, I know he can strike, but he's more of a jiu-jitsu heavy guy. Cody Durden, again, he can strike, but he's more of a grappling heavy guy. They've both got a very similar style in that grappling's kind of their bread and butter, but they can both kind of do a little bit on the feet. So I think if Jesus Aguilar wants to get someone in the top 15, beat Cody Durden, and if Cody Durden can beat obviously Aguilar, then I think he gets a bit of a step up as well. So Aguilar, Durden, I think stylistically should be quite a fun fight for 125. Two guys unranked at 125 who hadn't fought each other yet. I think that's a decent fight to make. And then for Tatiana Suarez, yeah, I said this in the breakdown. The strawweight's in a tough spot, man. That Tatiana Suarez and Amanda, Amanda Lemos are at the top of the bill in the strawweight division. It's a tough division to sell. But for Tatiana Suarez, I'd put her in there with Lupita Godinez. This is what I think should be the #1 contender fight. We've obviously got Jandiroba versus Mackenzie Dern, #2 for the strawweight belt, which even that's a bit of a messy title fight. So if that's going to be the title fight, I think considering that Tatiana Suarez has just got back in the winning column and beat Amanda Lemos, Lupita Godinez has been winning her most recent fights. I think it makes sense as a title eliminator. Lupita Godinez versus Tatiana Suarez. I don't want to give Suarez a title shot immediately because, I mean, she's on a 1-fight winning streak, and that one win was an awful win. Well, it wasn't an awful win, but it was an awful bland performance over Amanda Lemos. So I think she should get one more. And Lupita Godinez, she's been on a bit of a winning streak. I know she lost a couple of times last year, but she's got back in the winning column. If she can beat Suarez, that's a big win for Godinez. I say we throw her in the title picture, but I'm just trying to think about the women's strawweight title picture. There isn't really anybody else at the top. Now that Zhang Weili's gone, Dern's gone, Jandaroba's gone because they're fighting for the belt. Suarez versus Godinez, #1 contender fight on some sort of card next year. I'm not bothered. I guess you get that fight done. It makes sense because I don't want to throw Suarez back in the title picture. You may as well make a contender fight out of it. Suarez, Godinez, get it done. And then 4, Joaquim Silva beats Claudio Puelles in, again, I guess it was a bit uneventful matchup. He did more damage though, so he ended up getting the job done. I'd put him in there with Ismael Bonfim. Again, I think this is just a fight where it's 2 unranked guys that have put him a decent fight. If you look at their record, they're both kind of win-loss fighters. They're not good enough for the top 15 because every good fight they face, they end up losing. But they're good enough to kind of pick apart these guys who are kind of mid-level unranked at the 155. So I'll put them against each other. They have got a fairly, I don't want to say they've got a similar style, but they can both do a little bit of everything. Bonfim can strike, Joaquim Silva can strike. They can both pull off submissions. I think it's a fairly even matchup, so I'd probably do this for some sort of Apex card main event. Not main event, definitely not main event. Main card, Joaquim Silva versus Bonfim. Should be a fun matchup. Bit of a step up for Joaquim Silva after Claudio Puelles. And if he can beat Ismael Bonfim, then maybe we start talking about the likes of Rumbetsky and some of the better guys unranked at 155. But yeah, just 2 guys who are fairly even in terms of skill. I'd put them against each other. And then 4, Dusko Todorovic gets the job done over Jose Medina. I mean, it's a good win, I guess, but you're literally facing bottom of the barrel talent. So for Dusko Todorovic, I guess a tiny step up from bottom of the barrel talent would be Trezeguet Gore. It's a bit of a step up in competition. I mean, to be fair, they both have high finishing rates. You know, Dusko Todoric's only had 1 decision win in his entire career. Trezeguet Gore has only had 1 decision win in his entire career. They've both got pretty high finishing rates and stylistically could be quite fun. You know, Dusko Todorovic, good submission out. He's just pulled off the submission over Medina. Trezeguet Gore got 2 nasty guillotines in a row coming into 2025. So I think they're fairly even in terms of damage. I think it'll be quite a fun fight. Like I said, they're both hard hitting on the feet. They're both quite explosive. They're both got good submission ability. So I think it'll be a fun fight. It's a slight step over Todorovic, and again, similar to the fight with Jose Medina, whoever loses this fight, cut them from the UFC. If Gore takes another loss, he's got to go. If Todorovic loses to Gore, he's got to go too. So it's another one of these fights where they're fighting for their contract. Todorovic, Gore, get that done. And talking of fights where they're going to be fighting for their contract, Kwong Lee against Cameron Simon, where the loser gets cut from the UFC. I know I don't really want to see Cameron Simon go, but I think he's on a 3-fight losing streak now. I think 2 of them are by finish as well. So if he takes another loss to Kwong Lee, he's got to go. But yeah, I'd probably make this fight. If you look at their records, Kwong Lee's not, even though Kwong Lee's not even been performing that badly, his record doesn't show for it. Cameron Simon's on a 3-fight losing streak with 2 finishes. It's another one of those fights where they're both fighting for their contract. I would favour Cameron Simon to win this fight, but I think stylistically it would be quite fun. Cameron Simon, even though I guess he kind of got exposed for not being as good as we thought he was because he got hyped because of DDP's team, he has got pretty neat boxing, to be fair. He's got neat boxing. He's in this weird position where he's too big for 125, but too small for 135. But he is a pretty sharp striker. And so is Kwong Lee. I mean, in the fight he just had with Santiago Luna, dropped him in about 10 seconds. So I do feel like both of these guys are UFC worthy, but it gets to the point where if any of them take another loss, we've got to send them back to the regional scene. So I don't want to say it's a low-level fight, but it is one of those fights where the loser gets cut from the UFC, but it should still be fun. So Kwong Lee, Cameron Simon, I'd get that done for some point in early 2026, late 2025. They've both just been knocked out as well in their most recent fight. So Lee, Simon, I'd get that done. And then for Santiago Luna, there's no need to rush this guy. I'd put him in there with Cody Gibson. I think this is a fair step up for Santiago Luna. People need to remember, it's a perfect fight to test Santiago Luna, in my opinion. This guy's 21 years old. There's no need to rush him to the deep end. There's no need to give him a speed run. He's 21 years old. He's had 1 win in his UFC career. He's only had 7 professional fights. So I don't want to see people matching him up against like top 15 worthy guys or guys who are close to the top 15. I'd give him Cody Gibson. I think this is fair. Cody Gibson, he's doing his thing. You know, we got a couple of wins coming in before he's lost to Blackshear, but he's not really UFC worthy. He's 2-3, came from the Ultimate Fighter, lost on the finale, but he's still got a contract. So he is kind of bottom of the barrel talent in the UFC, but it's still a bit of a step up for Santiago Luna. Cody Gibson's very experienced. He's had a shit ton of fights. Like I said, he's beaten a couple of guys in the UFC. He's just one of these UFC journeymen. He's a bit of a win-loss fighter, eventually going to get cut from the UFC. It's a perfect fight to test Luna. If Luna can go out there and get another finish against Cody Gibson because he has got a 100% finishing rate, then that shows me that Obviously, he's maybe ready for that next level. We can start pushing him a little bit more, but I don't want to rush him to the deep end just because he beat Kwong Lee. You know what I mean? I think Cody Gibson's a fair step up in competition. It's a step down for Cody Gibson too after losing to Demon Blackshear, so I think this makes sense. No need to rush Luna. Let's give him Gibson. And to be fair to Gibson, he's a fun fighter as well. He's always in these dog fights. Even his fight with Demon Blackshear was fun. It's very rare that Cody Gibson's in one of these boring fights, so I think this is good. Perfect fight to test Santiago Luna. No need to rush him. He's 21 years old. He's got a ton of potential. Him and Cody Gibson, I think that makes sense. And then for Diego Ferreira, I think it's got to be retire. I'd just retire at this point if I was Diego Ferreira. You know, the guy's 40 years of age competing at 155. He's been in the UFC for what feels like forever at this point. So I'd probably tell Diego Ferreira to retire. He just took a brutal KO loss as well to Alexander Hernandez. Got dropped about 10 ground and pound shots. There's a massive swelling on his head. He's on a 2-fight losing streak now. If that's not enough to, you know, to make you want to retire, I think it's got to be it for Diego Ferreira. It's not a case of that I don't think he can compete with anyone, because he is pretty talented, is Diego Ferreira. I still think there's guys on the roster he could beat, but at this point it's like, is it really worth it? You're taking all this damage. You're probably not going to be getting paid the most as well because you've lost your last 2. You've just been brutally knocked out. You're coming up to 41 years old, and the guys that you are fighting ain't even going to be big names. So at this point for Diego Ferreira, I think retirement's a good option. You're 40 years old. You've just been brutally knocked out. I think now's probably the time to leave the spot. And then for Alexander Hernandez, he's had a career turnaround. 4-fight winning streak, 2 finishes. Called out Chandler. I don't think that's probably the fight to make, because with all due respect to Alexander Hernandez, I don't think he's on the same level as Chandler in terms of name value, but I think the perfect fight to make for Hernandez is him and Fares Ziam. These two guys, I think, are two guys who deserve to fight someone in the top 15 next. Fares Ziam was booked against Caio Fernandez, so I assume if the UFC ain't going to give Ziam someone in the top 15 because he did pull out against Fernandez, so they're probably going to make him fight again, I'd put him against Alexander Hernandez. I like this matchup a lot. They're both on winning streaks. Both guys, it's kind of like a number 1 contender fight for the top 15. Whoever wins gets a chance at the top 15. They're both on big winning streaks. They've both been looking good. So yeah, winner gets a big fight. If Feresian wins, give him a big fight. If Hernandez wins, give him a big fight. And I think they do deserve it, you know. And I think the fight would be fun too. Hernandez just knocked out Diego Ferreira. Feresian's usually in fun fights too. So yeah, I do Hernandez versus Ziam. Should be a fun fight. Winner gets someone in the top 15. Maybe even like a Chandler or a Moicano, or maybe even someone in the top 10. So I think this makes sense. Hernandez, Ziam, winner gets someone in the top 15, make that fight. And then for Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, usually when a fighter has lost as many times as Stoltzfus has lost, I'd say they need to get cut from the UFC. But to be fair to Stoltzfus, he's always in fun fights. I don't see the benefit of cutting him from the UFC. I think he deserves to stay because he's always in fun fights. And again, he made it fairly competitive with Gastelum. So for Dustin Stoltzfus, I put him in there with Andre Pulayev. I think this makes sense. It's a step down in competition from Kelvin Gastelum. And I think if you look at both their records, Pulayev's 2-1 in the UFC, just got a good knockout over Nick Klein. Stoltzfus, like I said, he's got a bit of a bad record recently, but he's always in banger fights. So I do Stoltzfus versus Pulayev. 2 strikers, 2 guys who are fairly low level in the middleweight division, but 2 guys who are usually fun. I think this is a really fun fight to put on. I can see it being a banger of a fight. I can see it being a fight that they do for like some sort of Apex co-main event, and then it's just an absolute banger. But then if you put him in front of a crowd, it'd be shit, because that's how the UFC goes these days. But yeah, Stoltzfus versus Pulayev, I'd get that done. I think if Stoltzfus takes another loss, then it's fair to cut him from the UFC, because then he's lost again. And I think if he, like I said, he takes another loss, maybe then you cut him. But yeah, Pulayev, Stoltzfus, I'd get that done. And then for Kelvin Gastelum, hopefully he can get his weight issues sorted out, because you can't be missing weight and fucking middleweight as well, especially by 5 pounds at this stage in your career. So if he doesn't get cut from the UFC for missing weight, I'd do Kelvin Gastelum versus Mikal. I think this is I think this would be an absolute banger of a fight to make, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Kelvin Gastelum is always in fun fights. I mean, the one he just had with Dustin Stoltzfus was fun. He's a walk forward boxer, hits pretty hard, great chin, so he's always durable. He's always in fun fights as Kelvin Gastelum. And Mikal, he's managed to pull his socks up. He's gone over to the Fighting Nerds, which I guess isn't a brag nowadays, but since joining the Fighting Nerds, he's got 2 first-round KOs in a row against fairly low-level fighters, so we need a bit of a step up. So I'd do Mikal versus Gastelum. If you look at their record, Gastelum's a bit of a win-loss fighter these days. He's a bit messy. He'll win, he'll lose, he'll miss weight, and then repeat. And Mikal, he's on a 2-fight winning streak, just knocked out Gerald and Domas back-to-back. So I'd do Mikal versus Kelvin Gastelum. If Mikal can beat Kelvin Gastelum, or potentially even crack the chin of Gastelum, that's going to be massive for Mikal. And at that point, I'd start talking about matching him against the likes of Marvin Vettori. And for Kelvin Gastelum, if he can beat Mikal, he's finally on a winning streak. He's beat this up-and-coming guy from the Fighting Nerds. Maybe we give a bit of a step up for Gastelum after that. But yeah, I think this would be a really fun fight. If it goes the distance, it ain't going to be boring, because none of these guys are ever in boring fights. They're both fairly dangerous. Mikal's dangerous. Kelvin's dangerous. And again, if Kelvin wins, Then again, you give him a bit of a step up. So, Kelvin McCall, I like that fight. I'd get it done. And then for Jared Gordon. Now, apparently he did get hit by a car before losing to Rafa Garcia, which kind of makes sense because I said in the breakdown, he looked off in that fight. He didn't look like the same Jared Gordon that fought Thiago Moises. So, I'd do Jared Gordon versus Esteban Ribovics. I think this would be an absolute banger. You can put this on any main card, even if it's a pay-per-view, and it'd just serve because it'll be a banger of a fight. Jared Gordon's usually really fun. In his most recent fight before the one with Rafa Garcia, absolutely slept Thiago Moises. He's a fun, walk forward, pretty powerful boxer. And Esteban Ribovics might be the human highlight reel. Every single one of his fights are always fun. He's never in a boring fight, and if he ain't going the distance and having a fight at the A contender, he's finishing people. So Ribovics versus Gordon, I really like this fight. This is just one of those classic fights unranked at 155 that you tend to see. It's between two guys between that 25 and 15 range at 155 that usually, you know, are always in banger fights. Gordon's always in fun fights. Ribovics is always in fun fights. It's a bit of a step down for Gordon, a bit of a step up for Ribovics. I'd get it done. Ribovics versus Jared Gordon, absolute banger of a fight. Like I said, you put this on any main card, it's just going to be a banger. So Gordon, Ribovics, easy fight of the night, easy banger. And if Ribovics can beat Jared Gordon, then he's close to the top 15. If Gordon can beat Ribovics, he's turning into a bit of a win-loss fighter, but all of his fights are fun. So I'd get this done. Gordon, Ribovics, fun-ass fight. And then for Rafa Garcia, I think he's on a 3-fight winning streak now. I do Rafa Garcia versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Again, another banger of a fight. Rafa Garcia just had that really fun and really good performance against Jared Gordon. Even though Gordon did look off, he slashed him open with elbows. He looked dangerous on the feet. He looked like the best version of Rafa Garcia we've ever seen. And Bahamondes, you know Bahamondes, one of the best kickboxers unranked at 155. Good rangy kickboxer. Lost to Fiziev, but there's no shame in that. Again, similar to the whole Ribovics versus Gordon situation. It doesn't matter where they fight or who they fight. It's going to be a fun fight. Bahamondes versus Garcia, main card of a fight night, a crowded fight night, easy main card fight, would be fun, would be a banger, makes sense. Again, between two guys between that 25 and 15 range at 155, Garcia, Bahamondes, get it done. And then for Rob Font, usually a bit of a gatekeeper in this division, and I guess that was the same case tonight. Loses to David Martinez unexpectedly as well, especially on short notice. So for Rob Font, I think I'd just simply rebook him against Raul Rosas Jr. I didn't have a problem with this fight the first time around, and in fact, I think it makes more sense now. You know, before it made sense, but, you know, Rob Font was on a 2-fight winning streak, and he had to fight down against Raul Rosas Jr. It was a bit of a massive step up and a massive jump for Raul Rosas Jr., but I think now that Rob Font's now coming off a loss to David Martinez, who has literally had one fight in the UFC, this fight makes a lot more sense now than it did before. And again, Raul Rosas Jr. hasn't fought since March of this year. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, and I'm still kind of intrigued. That, like I said, I was intrigued the first time around, but I thought it might be a bit of a mismatch because, like I said, it was a massive step up for Raul Rosas Jr. But now that Rob Font's coming off a loss, I think it makes even more sense. So I'd simply just rebook it. Rob Font versus Raul Rosas Jr. Big opportunity for Raul Rosas Jr. to break into the top 15. They've both had a training camp for each other before. Raul Rosas Jr. is dealing with an injury. Rob Font's just fought. I think this can easily be made for early 2026. So, Rob Font, Raul Rosas Jr., I just simply rebooked the fight. I was interested the first time. I think it makes even more sense now. So, I do Rob Font versus Raul Rosas Jr. David Martinez. What a crazy year it's been. Came into the year and he weren't even in the UFC, and now he's going to be in the top 10 of the bantamweight division as he goes out there and beats Rob Font. So for David Martinez, I'd put him against the loser of O'Malley and Song Yadong. There's been a heavily rumoured fight between Sean O'Malley and Song Yadong for UFC 323, and I think whoever loses that fight, I'd put them against David Martinez. People are going to say don't rush Martinez, because when you hear him and O'Malley in the same sentence, you think he's getting rushed, but bro, the guy's just beat Rob Font. The guy's just beat Rob Font in his second fight in the UFC. Rob Font, the best gatekeeper in this weight class, and he did it, and he's now going to be in the top 9 of the bantamweight division. We ain't rushing him. He's already showed us that he's here to stay, and well, not here to stay, but he's showed us that he's ready for the top 10 in the bantamweight division. In terms of O'Malley and Song Yadong, it hasn't been official yet, but it's heavily rumored for the UFC 323. And even if it hasn't been official, I think this makes sense for both O'Malley and Song Yadong. It makes sense. They're two guys in the top 5 who haven't fought each other yet. So I'd try and get that fight done for UFC 323. And like I said, whoever loses, I'd give them to David Martinez. And I want to see David Martinez against these guys in the top 10 at bantamweight, because he isn't just one of these boring kind of prospects that have managed to bore themselves into the top 10 like a Kyler Phillips. He's really fun. He's got these, he's got a shit ton of energy. Charismatic guy, dangerous as fuck, always in your face, dangerous style. David Martinez against O'Malley and Yadong, I don't mind it. So whoever loses that fight between Song Yadong and O'Malley, probably going to be Song Yadong. I'd put David Martinez against them. Good step up in competition, not too big of a step up, but like I said, he's in the top 10 now. He's coming off a good win. He may as well get rewarded for it. Martinez versus the loser of O'Malley and Song Yadong, I'd do that. And then for Gene Silva, gets absolutely bludgeoned by Diego Lopes. Yeah, that was a brutal fight to watch if you're a Gene Silva fan. dominated in the first, and then nearly knocked out with that spinning elbow in the second, and then absolutely slashed open with ground and pound. Brutal performance from Diego Lopes. In terms of Gene Silva, I'd put him against the winner of Josh Emmett and Yusuf Zalal. Yeah, they've booked Josh Emmett and Yusuf Zalal for UFC 320, and I put them against Gene Silva. I think whoever wins that fight, they deserve a big name after that. They deserve, you know, quite a big fight, and I think Gene Silva is that fight. I'm kind of hoping that Josh Emmett wins, because Josh Emmett versus Gene Silva is kind of like a, I don't want to say a fantasy fight, but it's a fight I really want to see in the featherweight division, because I can definitely see a world where Gene Silva just completely bullies Josh Emmett, picks him apart, and, you know, just bullies him on the feet. But I can also see a world where Josh Emmett has success and makes it a dogfight, because Josh Emmett, if there's one thing he has, it's a chin. If there's another thing he has, it's a power. You know, go back to Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett. Topuria was absolutely butchering Josh Emmett, and he stayed across 5 rounds, and that's Topuria we're talking about. So I want to see Josh Emmett versus Gene Silva. So if he can beat Yusuf Zalal, get that fight done. And if Zalal wins, he's got 2 wins in the top 15. A massive win over Gene Silva would push him in the top 5. So yeah, Gene Silva, bit of a step down in competition against the winner of Emmett and Zalal. Some people might say Gene Silva needs to fight outside the top 15, but I disagree. You know, he's got a win in the top 15, and he lost to literally the #1 guy in Diego Lopes. So I do Gene Silva against the winner of Emmett and Zalal. I think that'll be a good fight. And then for Diego Lopes, slashes open Gene Silva. His best win yet, in my opinion, his best career win. So I do Diego Lopes. Well, I think he's one more big fight away from a title shot, just to make things clear. So I think what the UFC should do is Arnold Allen versus Aljamain Sterling. I've talked about this before. I think this should be the fight the UFC makes. Sterling versus Allen, #1 contender fight. Allen's coming off a win. Sterling's coming off a win. Book that fight. Not a #1 contender fight, but just book that fight. And whoever wins, put them against Diego Lopes for a title eliminator. That's what I would do. So I'd do Allen versus Sterling for UFC 323. Whoever wins that fight in early 2026 takes on Diego Lopes for a title eliminator. I think this makes sense. If Aljamain Sterling wins, he's going to be coming off a few wins. He's a former champion. Him and Diego Lopes would be, you know, super interesting. And again, it's a #1 contender fight. A former champion versus a former title contender. That makes sense. And if Arnold Allen wins, him and Diego Lopes is just orgasmic as a fight. 2 guys that scrap, 2 guys that are dangerous, 2 of some of the best strikers in the featherweight division. If Allen and Lopes gets made for a title eliminator, that would be a banger. But yeah, I wouldn't give Lopes a title shot just yet, because he's just had one and lost. But I'd definitely give him a top contender. Allen and Sterling, I'd get that fight done. I don't think the winner of Allen and Sterling necessarily deserve a title fight, because they have taken a couple of losses in this division. So I think whoever wins that fight, give them Lopes, and whoever wins between Lopes, Allen, and Sterling, give them a title fight over the winner of Vulcan Leroy Murphy. But yeah, those are the fights I'm going to make after UFC Noche. Let me know if you agree or disagree with these fights, if you like the fights, if you change anything around, what your fights will be. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.